Good morning and welcome to the Dwelling Online service. My name is Matthew and I have the privilege of serving on the Dwelling Serve team. We are so excited that you've joined us for Church Online today. Parents, there's a link in the comments section as well as on our website, thedwellingchurch.org, to our Dwelling Kids Online page. There, you're going to find videos, coloring pages, and even a parent's guide to help you create a special space for your little ones after watching the service together this morning. If you're new to the Dwelling and watch this for the first time today, text the word CONNECT to the number on the screen and let us know you're here. We'd love to send you a little note of encouragement this week. On our website, we have a new resource page to help you equip both you and your family. On this page, you'll find so many great resources, from our living room podcast to our table talk discussion guides. Visit thedwellingchurch.org/resources to find out more. Now, wherever you are this morning, let's turn our hearts to the Lord and worship Him.
of revival rain. I hear the sound, I hear the sound, I hear the sound of revival rain. I hear the sound, I hear the sound, I hear the sound of revival rain. I hear the sound, I hear the sound, yes. I hear the sound of revival rain. I hear the sound, I hear the sound, yeah. Open up the heavens, pouring out a blessing. Lord, we need refreshing till it overflows. Open up the heavens, pouring out a blessing. Lord, we need refreshing till it overflows. Open up the heavens, pouring out a blessing. Lord, we need refreshing till it overflows. Open up the heavens, pouring out a blessing. Lord, we need refreshing till it's raining, it's raining, it's raining, it's raining. Oh, it's pouring, it's pouring, it's pouring, it's pouring. Overflow, 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 overflow. Oh, the blood, oh, the blood, oh, the blood, oh, the blood. Rain on me. Open the windows of heaven. Open up the heavens. Jesus. Yeah.
We've heard the revival stories of ancient and old-time glory. Spirit of God, come do it again. Miracle-working power, moving in signs and wonders. Spirit of God, come do it again. Prepare the way, He's coming through. Ready or not, our God's on the move. We're gonna see heaven on earth. Come, Holy Spirit, awaken your church. God, you're just getting started. A testimony of more to come. Spirit of God, come do it in us. We're joining the faith of heaven and prophesy your kingdom here on earth. Spirit of God, come do it in us. Prepare the way,
Fire fall, wind come blow. We're ready for more, ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more. Fire fall, wind come blow. We're ready for more, ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more. Fire fall, wind come low. We're ready for more, ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more. Fire fall, wind come low. We're ready for more, ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more. Fire fall, we're ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more. Fire fall, wind come low. We're ready for more, ready for more. Break down the walls, push back the doors. We're ready for more, ready for more.
He's coming through, ready or not, our God's on the move. We're gonna sing heaven on earth. Come, Holy Spirit, awaken your church. We've heard the revival stories of ancient and old-time glory. Spirit of God, do it again. Spirit of God, do it again. Spirit of God, do it again.
Good morning. I'm Bethany Akridge. You're probably more accustomed to seeing my husband up here, Gunnar, but the other night we were talking on the couch and we were sharing some of the things that God had been speaking to us over the last few days. And when he heard what I had to share, he thought it really fit the theme of what the message needed to be this week. So here I am, and I'm so happy to be with you this morning. Do you ever have dreams or weird experiences when you're sleeping? A lot of times God will communicate to me through dreams and different experiences I have while I'm waking up. So last Sunday morning, I was waking up and I heard a phrase in my mind. It was like I heard myself say it in my own mind. I want to be like Sarah. And it was almost like God and I had been having this conversation and he was in agreement. And so as I came to my senses and I started to wake up, I thought, Sarah? No, wait, not Sarah. She was the one who didn't believe God and it got her in all kind of trouble. Let me backtrack. Let me come up with somebody better to be like. Maybe Mary. Yeah, Mary's a good one. Or Esther. Or Deborah. She was a strong woman from the Bible. So I got up and I thought, that was strange. Went about my day. But something funny happened between that moment and about lunchtime. There were about 6 or 7 different references to Sarah. It was the kids, I think, mentioned her to each other during breakfast. I sat down to read a totally different passage in the Bible than where Sarah's life was, and there she was. We had 2 different Dwelling Kids videos that morning after church, and Sarah was in both of them. And so after a while, I started to say, okay, my curiosity is going to get the best of me. I know God is saying something here. What's up with Sarah? By the end of it, I felt like, okay, if that's what you mean by Sarah, after I had pressed in and just listened to the Holy Spirit about what he was saying about Sarah, I thought to myself, okay, I'm okay with being like Sarah, if that's what you mean. And by the end of this message, you may be like that too. So today we're going to be talking about going from broken hearts to belly laughs. That's my catchy title. If you like a good look at Sarah's very dramatic and eventful life, you can find more of her story from Genesis 11 through chapter 23. But even that is not the whole story. So for now, let's start with one event in Sarah's life in Genesis chapter 18. And I'm going to skip around a little bit. It says, "Now the Lord appeared to Abraham," which is her husband, "by the oaks of Mamre," no idea if I'm saying that right, "while he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day. The Lord appeared to him. When he lifted up his eyes and looked, behold, 3 men were standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, 'My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by.'" Now in the next few verses, Abraham and Sarah are running around, getting food, getting the visitors to sit down and rest, getting water, being super hospitable because they knew who was at the tent door. So there's Abraham outside the tent with them, and here's the first thing they say. "Then they said to him, 'Where is Sarah, your wife?' And he said, 'There, in the tent.' He said, 'I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah your wife will have a son.' And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, 'After I have become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?' And the Lord said to Abraham, 'Why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you, at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son.' Sarah denied it, however, saying, 'I did not laugh,' for she was afraid. And he said, 'No, but you did laugh.'" So picture it. Just put yourself in this situation. What would you do if the Lord showed up at your house? You were the first person he asked for. He called you by name, promised that by that time next year, you would have the one thing you had always longed for and could never have. Your first response, would it be to laugh in his face and say he's wrong? Probably wouldn't be your number one answer. But do you really know what was behind Sarah's laugh? This wasn't a laugh that said, "Oh, that's hilarious. I can't believe he said that." Or, "That's so silly." It wasn't that kind of laugh. No, this laugh, I dare say, stung with cynicism. It dripped with bitterness. It was heavy with pain. Why? Because Sarah was disappointed. She was disappointed with herself. She was disappointed with her husband, Abraham. And she was disappointed with God himself. Disappointment bred unbelief. And unbelief is what made her scoff in the middle of hearing what would have been the best news of her life, straight from the mouth of God himself. So I have to tell you this about myself. I am so basic Southern woman. I love sweet tea, especially when it's from a mason jar on a porch. That's pretty basic. Can anybody testify with me? So have you ever been to a get-together and you pour yourself a glass of tea and you put it to your lips and it's unsweet? You spit it out everywhere. It's still tea, but what makes it in that moment so disgusting to you? It was because you were expecting sweet, cold goodness. Your expectation was for something good. You had hope for that, but then you put it to your mouth and you get unsweet. You were excited about the good, and that's why it made the unsweet so bad in the moment. The disappointment So let's rewind Sarah's life. How did she get to this place where she would bitterly laugh at the Lord himself when he promised her something good? A lot of water had flowed under that bridge. A lot of life had happened since she had first heard about God's promise that he made to Abraham. Not just a lot of life, but 24 years of waiting. God had promised Abraham and Sarah that they would become a great nation, that they'd have a large family. The whole world would be blessed because of them. So this was, since then, 24 years of wondering, could today be the day? Could today be the day that the Lord's going to give us a family? And then it wasn't. It was 24 years of watching other people, even in Sarah's own household, have babies, but not her. The Bible tells us that 318 baby boys had been born in her household alone, but not to her. 24 years of thinking. She knew her purpose and she knew what God had said, but maybe that wasn't the case. 24 years. The only person who God had promised, you will have this child, was the only person who couldn't make it happen. You become disappointed with yourself when you have a hope and then realize you just can't deliver, that you're inadequate to make the good thing happen that you know is supposed to happen. So what do? Well, some of us try to fix it. I say us. Some of us try to fix it. Sarah tried to fix it by telling Abraham to go sleep with her servant to maybe have a baby that way. But when that happened, the disappointment just piled on, because then it became even more obvious that Sarah was the problem. Abraham could even go on and have babies with other people, but not with her. She was the only one who couldn't make the one thing happen that she was promised. Have you ever thought that you had a gift for something or a calling on your life? I tell you firsthand, when I believe that God has gifted me in something and I mess up in that area, it cuts so deep. I could mess up in a million different areas and just say I'm sorry and move on, not a big deal. But the thing that I feel like that God's called me to, when I sin, when I hurt somebody by using that gift, that's when it's the worst. So I feel like if there was something that God has called me to my whole life, it's been communication. And you might think that's funny hearing me speak. But at the same time, that I feel like so many times I've seen him move when I've encouraged somebody one-on-one, or when I've written something and brought clarity to somebody's life. My mouth and my communication has also been the thing that has gotten me in the biggest trouble in my life. And that even this year, that has happened several times. And I went back and said, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean this. But when that happens, it will shake you to your core. When you really feel like God has called you to do something and then you totally just fall on your face. I'm learning where in that area, humility and grace have to replace the perfectionism that I put on myself. Even though maybe God's called me to that, my own expectations of myself canceled out the grace that he had. So Sarah was disappointed with herself, but she was disappointed with Abraham too. The Bible says that Abraham believed the Lord and it was counted to him as righteousness. So we'll clap and we'll admire Abraham's faith. And we do agree with what God says about Abraham, that he was a man of faith. He did show a lot of faith at times, but Abraham wasn't always so admirable. Somehow he could believe God that he was going to give him as many descendants as the stars of the sky. But then somehow Abraham didn't believe that God was going to keep him alive long enough to have those descendants. So when the family would travel to a new place, a new region, a new country, Abraham would make Sarah promise him, okay, pretend you're not my wife. Don't tell him you're my wife. Let's just say brother and sister, which was true, and we're not going to get into all of that. But just don't tell him you're my wife, because you are so beautiful that they might kill me so they can have you. So let's just pretend. And so on more than one occasion, they'd go to a new land. They would do this. They would play this game, and Abraham would pretend that Sarah wasn't his wife. The foreign king, of course, would see her and tote her off to his palace, and Abraham just left there at the house, and Sarah's at the palace with the king because he's going to go make her his wife, and Abraham wouldn't stand up for her. So Abraham was the father of our faith. He was the man known for his great faith. But then he was too fearful to stand up for his wife and would just let some foreign king just carry her off. He minimized her identity, and he put his own well-being over hers, because he didn't know what was happening at the palace when they would take her away. So Sarah was disappointed in herself because of what she didn't bring to the table. She was disappointed in her leader, Abraham, for how he didn't play the role that he was supposed to play. But Sarah was also disappointed in God himself. By this time, the visit happened in chapter 18. The Lord had showed up and made promises to Abraham. He had asked Sarah and Abraham to leave everything, their home, their family, their country, everything they had known, security, comfort, for this land he was going to show them. He promised to bless them, to give them a family, to make them a great nation, to give them the land. But at this point in chapter 18, when he shows up at the tent, do you know how much of that had happened? 0. None of it had happened. So by the time the Lord showed up at the tent, Sarah was just a woman going through the motions. She would run around and get food and serve the Lord, but she didn't believe him. She didn't believe what he said. She couldn't. The pain was just too great that she had endured. She didn't want to pull her hopes up one more time just to not have anything happen. She heard him call her by her name. He even knew that she laughed to herself, but she didn't think he knew her well enough to know that he couldn't make this claim he was making. She was old. Do you feel that sinking feeling in your stomach even now? Do you know, are you so acquainted with disappointment that you know where Sarah is right now? Do you know what it's like to have a laugh just stuck in your throat when somebody talks about the goodness of God? Has disappointment brought you there like it had brought Sarah there? It's brought me there before. Earlier this year, I was so disappointed in myself. Things I didn't like, things that I had not done perfectly. I was disappointed. I had been disappointed for years by imperfect people that I looked up to, that I admired, that I expected better from. And I might have even been a little disappointed with God, to the point where I didn't feel like I could trust him totally anymore. I was on my own. I was being independent. Sarah's bitter laugh settled deep into my heart, and I felt it. It's easy to get there when you don't see as God sees. When you put your hope in yourself, or in other people, or in circumstances. Even when you put your hope in what you think God ought to do, or what he ought to be like, or your narrow understanding of what he's doing. It's easy to get there. But the good news is that's not the end of the story. It wasn't the end of Sarah's story. It's not the end of my story, and it's not the end of your story. Let me read you that passage that I read last Sunday morning, that Sarah wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't expected, but there she was. Isaiah 51 says, "Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were hewn and the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father and Sarah who gave birth to you in pain. Abraham was only one man when I called him, but when I blessed him, he became a great nation. Indeed, the Lord will comfort Zion. He will comfort all her waste places. Her desert will blossom like Eden, her barren wilderness like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found there. Songs of thanksgiving will fill the air. I can imagine that Sarah, at this point in her story, probably felt dead inside. She felt like that barren wilderness that it talked about in Isaiah 51. The one thing she was supposed to do, she just couldn't make it happen. But this same woman is the one who ended up being mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11, listed as one of the most faithful. If you've been in church any amount of time, you could have heard this called the Hall of Faith or something like that, some grand name. It says, by faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore there was born even of one man, and him as good as dead at that, as many descendants as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. See, what I remembered of Sarah when I woke up last Sunday morning, not wanting to be like her, was that her legacy was unbelief. That's what I remembered. She didn't believe the Lord. She laughed. I didn't want to be grouped in with her because I didn't like the unbelief that I knew was in me. It scared me. But God says that wasn't the end of the story. When He finished writing her story, she was a woman of great faith, and therefore a son was born to Abraham. She believed before she had even conceived Isaac. It's not that her faith came when Isaac was born. She believed, she had the faith, and so she conceived. The writer of Hebrews honors Sarah for her faith. Her disappointment led to unbelief, but it ended in faith. Sarah had plenty of reason to be disappointed in her flawed husband. But let's look at the rest of the story. We find Sarah again in the New Testament in 1 Peter chapter 3. She's held up as an example of how wives should relate to husbands, even when they don't do what's right. Sarah is grouped with women who are beautiful because of their hidden person of the heart. It says, with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. Now, it could just be me, but gentle and quiet are not exactly the words that I would use to describe Sarah before I read the rest of the story. I mean, she was the one who bossed Abraham into sleeping with her servant because it just wasn't happening. She was the one who bossed Abraham later to send Hagar away when she didn't like how her son was acting. The hard truth is, I am like Sarah. Let me tell you a story. One of the most embarrassing. My kids love to remind me of a certain home video that they have seen of me when I was young. I should have never let them watch it. But home videos don't seem to capture my finest moments as a child, if there were any. In this particular one, Santa Claus had just visited my grandparents' house. And I was about 4, my brother was about 1, and we were in their living room just seeing the toys that he had brought for the first time. So my brother was just this drooling, smiling toddler, just toddling around in a diaper. Cute, happy all the time. He didn't know any better but to just toddle right over there, start checking out my toys. My toys. From off camera, a screeching scream of, "Oh no!" erupted on the home video, and here I come running to get him away from my stuff. It was not a flattering moment. Well, my kids thought that was hilarious, and I really regret ever letting them see that home video, because now that has become a catchphrase that they remind me of often at our house. They'll just randomly, "Oh no," and remind me of all the terrible moments that I threw fits as a kid. So gentle and quiet spirit, because of course that's continued. is not the exact phrase that I would use to describe how I feel most of the time. It's not one of those easily attainable parts of the Bible that I would love to achieve. But there's something that I learned this week. We do make choices, and we choose to humble ourselves. We choose to agree with God about what He says, and we choose to submit to Him, just like Sarah did and is praised here for her gentle and quiet spirit. But gentleness is also a fruit of the Spirit listed in Galatians 5. So as much effort as we can try to make, gentleness is still a fruit of the Spirit. It's still His work in our lives that brings about the good fruit that we want, just like Sarah's life. Jesus said the meek will inherit the earth. He'll give it to them because they're not fighting for what's theirs. So Sarah's praised here for doing what is right with a right attitude, even when her leader didn't. She relied on God to defend her when Abraham just would let the king carry her off to the palace, when she wasn't treated well, when she wasn't respected. And guess what? God did. Every time. Abraham didn't come to rescue her. God would make something happen in that situation, and you can go read more about it. But He was the one who defended her. People will never be perfect, even when they think they should be, or we hope they will be. So it's not saying that God expects us to just sit around and let people treat us however they will. But God rights injustices like no one else. If a leader or someone you look up to has failed, you do the right thing. God will take that disrespect and turn it into honor, just like He did with Sarah. So speaking of God, what about Sarah's disappointment with Him? Genesis chapter 21 says, this is my favorite part, "Then the Lord took note of Sarah, as He had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as He had promised." So all these other times, God has been making promises to Abraham, until He shows up at the tent and asks for Sarah by name. And so in chapter 21, after more time had gone by, and it mentions the birth of Isaac, then the Lord took note of Sarah and did for Sarah as He promised. And how did Sarah respond? Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." So at what could have been one of her most shameful moments, where she laughed with bitterness at the promise that God made her, when Isaac was born, everything changed. God has made laughter for me, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. She embraced her mistake, and she moved forward into a whole different kind of laughter. This is not the bitter laughter that she had. This is an open, full of life, full of joy, unashamed, let's just share it kind of laughter, contagious laughter. This is the laughter of a person who embraces that God can be trusted. This is a person who knows they're seen, who realizes they could have believed all along. The laughter of a person changed. This isn't a story just about a little old couple who wanted a baby. It's much bigger than that. Abraham and Sarah were part of a much bigger picture, and it says that too in Hebrews chapter 11. Like Sarah's, our story is just one tiny piece of a huge one. Important enough that God Himself will show up at the door of our tent and call us by name, but way too vast for us to see how it all fits together. If God's hand in Sarah's life can take her from where she was and that state she was in to where she ended up, and we see evidence of that all through the New Testament, then yes, at this point I do want to be like Sarah. I am like Sarah. So just close your eyes for just a minute and focus on what God is saying to you. What disappointments do you need to acknowledge to Him? He wants you to be honest with Him. He wants the real you. Take those disappointments and hand them over to Him. Give Him every one of them. And listen to what He has to say about them, because He sees a bigger picture that you may not see. Surrender. You can trust Him with your life and with yourself. Whatever steps of trust that He's speaking to you to take those steps of trust. You may not be belly laughing just yet, but the story's not over yet. He writes the final word. So if you've never surrendered your life to Jesus and you'd like to today, just text LIFE to the number on the screen. We'll reach out to you and let you know the next steps you should take on your adventure with Him. Thank you so much for tuning in to Church Online today. I've enjoyed being with you so much, and I cannot wait to see your wonderful, beautiful faces the next time we all get together. So have a blessed week. Be like Sarah.
We hope this message and time of worship has encouraged you and built your faith today. We would love to pray for any needs you have. You'll find a link to a prayer request form in the comments section. Just click that link and fill out the form, and we'll be in touch with you. We have a new resource here at the Dwelling called Table Talk. Table Talk is a dinner table discussion guide for you, your family, and friends. This guide is a follow-up to Sunday's message with questions for discussion, scripture, main points, and ways to pray together. You can find each week's Table Talk on our website at thedwellingchurch.org/resources. Next Steps is happening tonight at 5:30. If you want more information on how to get connected here at The Dwelling, take your next step today and sign up for tonight's online Zoom meeting. During this 30-minute meeting, you'll hear from Pastor Gunnar about the vision of The Dwelling and how you can be a part of what God is doing here in Savannah. Send us a message via Facebook or our contact form on our website at thedwellingchurch.org to sign up. If you're wondering how you can give, we've made it easy for you. You can simply text any amount to 84321. Or you can go to our website, thedwellingchurch.org, and click the Give button. If you choose to give by check, you can mail the check to the Dwelling Church at P.O. Box 60725, Savannah, Georgia 31419. Thank you, as always, for your generosity. And thanks again for joining us for Church Online. We enjoyed having you. We'll see you right here next week.